With Scarlet and Violet being released in just 1 week, it's an exciting time to be a Pokemon fan. Of course, with excitement also comes fear. Fear that these games won't be the ultimate open world adventure we've always dreamt of. You know what? They probably won't be, but they can still be good games. I'm all about managing expectations, especially when it comes to Pokemon. So let's take a look at what we know so far, what we hope for, and what we can realistically expect. When the Switch launched, we got what many consider to be the ultimate open world video game in the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This game's influence can be felt in almost every open world game since. Pokemon has even capitalized on it already with Legends Arceus. There is, however, something else Breath of the Wild has that Pokemon refuses to apply to their game design: a loose, bare-bones story. I personally can't stand the stories in Pokemon games. The fact that Scarlet and Violet is touting having 3 stories as if it's a good thing is quite honestly making me lose my mind. For these games to be great, the stories will either have to be actually good for once, or be the backdrop for our adventure that we can complete on our own time with little to no interruption. By the looks of it, the gym challenge and evil team plots are filled with cutscenes, and it's all but confirmed there won't be voice acting, so yay. Can't wait to spend half my playthrough reading. I'd much rather have voice acting, even if it's a lot. I woke up for this? I mean, it's better than this. If you're not gonna have voice acting and you insist on throwing hundreds of cutscenes at us, I don't know, man, hire a good writer? Raise the stakes, develop your characters. Stop using the same plot over and over again. Oh, actually, you can reuse a plot if it's the Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky plot. That's cool with me. Let's talk about route design. The Crown Tundra and Legends Arceus both had pros and cons to their open worldiness. The Crown Tundra gave us diverging paths, each with their own storyline. I felt like I could explore and complete the missions at my own pace. It was fun to investigate every nook and cranny, and I even found myself getting lost in the caves, which hasn't happened since like, I don't know, Gen 3? Nevertheless, being such a small zone, seeing the same areas over and over again, it got old quick. Legends Arceus had incredible open areas with a ton of room for exploration. This begged the question, should I complete the story in this zone before I explore? Or explore and then complete the story? I didn't want to explore an entire area only to have to return to it to progress the game. Even though this question lingered in the back of my mind for like a majority of my playthrough, I found the traversal fantastic, especially once I got the ride Pokemon. I didn't mention the wild area or the Isle of Armor, despite those also being open world, because I find more negatives than positives in their designs. I really believe Game Freak learned a ton from these areas and applied the positives to the Crown Tundra and then Legends Arceus. Hopefully, they can take the positives from those two and make Scarlet and Violet the best open world Pokemon we've had so far. It probably won't be the level of Breath of the Wild, but I have no doubt the series will get there eventually. Just wish it would move a little faster. One thing we were all surprised to see is the inclusion of 4-person co-op. We're still not 100% sure how it works, but it seems like your group will only be able to explore the wild areas together, leaving the towns and story areas for single player. I think this could be a really big deal for the games if it's done properly and not like whatever this is. Pokemon has always placed a huge emphasis on trading and battling with your friends. So the ability to actually play through the game with them too could be revolutionary. I think if we're lucky, this could be a great way to appease older fans who are frustrated with the difficulty of recent games, by making it possible to mess around with your friends to make the experience more fun. Since we're talking about playing with your friends anyway, we should probably talk about how you actually connect with people. I'm not sure why, but Game Freak decided that the player search system from Gen 6 was too good and needed to be toned down a bit. Gen 7's Festival Plaza was an attempt to make the PSS more fun and modern, but it ended up feeling like Club Penguin, and not in a good way. Gen 8's YCOM was like, why communicate when you cannot communicate? If Scarlet and Violet's online communication feature isn't as good or better than the PSS, which may I remind you is a decade old, then what are we even doing here? I think with the new co-op feature, they kind of have to make the UI simple and easy to use, but will it work is the real question. Let's talk about the game's difficulty. As we all know, Pokemon is really only difficult when you don't know what's going on. Knowing type matchups, items, and movesets goes a long way. For those of us who have mastered these mechanics, the only real challenge comes with level discrepancies and enemy team makeup. So, what can Scarlet and Violet do to raise difficulty for people who know the series inside and out? The obvious answers are better AI and stronger CPU teams. I think there is a chance that Scarlet and Violet make battles in the game an actual challenge. I've never shared this before, but I actually lost to Leon in my first playthrough of Pokemon Sword. It wasn't a Nuzlocke or anything, I just straight up lost. Also, in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Cynthia's team was reworked to be much more challenging than the base games. So while not every battle's gonna have us sweating, I have faith a few will test even us seasoned veterans. Another source of difficulty comes from competitive Pokemon. I'm not just talking about battling, I'm talking about building a team to battle in the first place. Mainline Pokemon is infamous for having an extremely high barrier of entry. Recent generations have made this process easier, but it still remains too daunting for many casual players, especially when the game doesn't even show you how to do it. On the upside, each new generation has improved the process significantly, drastically reducing the time it takes to get a good Pokemon. In a perfect world, Scarlet and Violet would take the single biggest step they could to make competitive Pokemon accessible and introduce an in-game Pokemon simulator that players could use online against other trainers. Basically, an official Pokemon showdown. The odds of that happening are probably zero, but hey, it's nice to dream. In lieu of a simulator, there's a few more things Pokemon could add to make the process easier. Giving away some of the hard to get currency during a playthrough would be a big step, as stuff like bottle caps, ability patches, and BP can take tedious grinding. On the subject of bottle caps, I'd love to see an item added that allows us to reduce an IV to 0, or better yet, set it to any number we want, since that's one of the only features missing from the game in Sword and Shield. Lastly, being more upfront about the mechanics of the game during the single-player campaign mode would go a long way in getting the general player base up to speed. Speaking of competitive Pokemon, let's talk about balance. So this might come as a surprise, but I kinda like that Pokemon isn't the most balanced game. In all honesty, if what you want in a competitive game is perfect balance, Pokemon probably isn't the game for you. While Pokemon isn't intended to be a balanced game, specific Pokemon are, a problem. There's no doubt the series has seen a power creep. I mean, just look at these usage stats. A majority of these Pokemon are from recent generations, and many of those from past generations had to be buffed to get here. Will Scarlet and Violet continue this trend? Most likely. Just please, for the love of all things holy, leave Incineroar out. Even though I personally don't really care about graphics, I do have a take on them. The Pokemon textures look like they've been improved, but the overworld, I don't know, it just seems too bright and washed out. It feels like the series is having an identity crisis. Gens 1 through 8 had a clear progression in their art style and graphical fidelity. And then Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus came and decided to take another approach. Now, Scarlet and Violet look like they can't decide where to go. Will it take me out of the game? No. But I know it will for a lot of other people. The truth is, unless Game Freak decides to focus on art style over graphics, we're never getting that open world Pokemon game that we've always dreamt about. Since the Wii, each console has struggled to keep up with its competitors. No matter how good Pokemon's graphics get, it feels like the games are always going to be a generation behind what they should be. And no, I'm not saying the chibi mobile game graphics from BDSP are the way to go. I want actually good, fun to look at art. Think about how Pokemon started out. Crappy 8-bit, hard to decipher sprites. And they just got better and better with each new generation until we got that boring, modern look in Sun and Moon. Then again, all of this might just be personal preference. I can't really be sure. How do you feel about Scarlet and Violet's graphics? I think, as long as there are no trees, I'll be fine with them, albeit not thrilled. Another subject that feels like it's been beaten to death is the National Dex. It's pretty safe to assume Scarlet and Violet aren't going to have every Pokemon. This isn't an issue for me, though I know it is for some people. I personally don't think every Pokemon game needs every single Pokemon to be good, and I really appreciate how limiting the pool of Pokemon can allow often overlooked Pokemon to shine. It's not random that Pachirisu won the World Championships in a year with a very limited number of Pokemon. I still have one big thing that I feel like needs to be addressed. What is the post-game gonna look like? Will we finally be able to go to a previous region again? Or are we gonna do another 2-hour fetch quest? Because if that's it, count me out. No thank you. It's filler, it's boring, and it's lazy. The Sword and Shield postgame was one of my least favorite experiences in gaming, and the fact that the reward was Zacian added insult to injury. What would a good Pokemon game postgame look like? Well, I think there's some set criteria. It needs to allow the game to still be fun after you've beaten it. In my opinion, Generations 3 and 4 had the best postgame in the series, thanks to the inclusion of the Battle Frontier, one of my all-time favorite mechanics in Pokemon. I remember really enjoying the Villa in Pokemon Platinum as well. Having characters from the story visit is something that nobody really talks about, but to my teenage self was amazing. I don't have high hopes for Scarlet and Violet since Gen 6, 7, and 8 all had abysmal postgames, but hey, a guy can dream, right? One upside of the new games is that HMs are gone, and ride Pokemon are in. Except, Scarlet and Violet are only letting us ride the legendaries for some reason. This is weird, but I have to admit the traversal from Legends Arceus was one of my favorite aspects of the game. So if it's anything like that, I'm personally excited. TMs were made reusable in Gen 5, but Game Freak decided to go back on that with TRs in Gen 8. And then BDSP went ahead and just nixed TMs as well. I heard you'll be able to make TMs yourself in Scarlet and Violet, but how good this is really depends on how expensive the TMs are. Last thing I have here is the gimmick. Since Generation 6, every new Pokemon game has had a temporary central mechanic introduced with it. In this case, it's Terastalization. While I do wish we could get a game with no battle gimmick at all, Terastalization looks like it could be fun. This new mechanic allows you to change or increase the power of your Pokemon's type. As I've said before, in the video where I ended up predicting this mechanic almost exactly, this could lead to some really interesting strategies. There is cause for concern, however. There's two things in particular that worry me. They've announced that if a Pokemon terastalizes into a type that they already are, they receive a bonus damage buff. If this boost to damage is too high, it has the potential to totally monopolize how players use Terastalization. This actually has even more potential to ruin the game than Z-moves or Dynamax. Because while both of those mechanics were strong, you could only target one Pokemon at a time with your powered up attacks. Stuff like, I don't know, for example, Eruption, Terra Fire Torkoal, Water Spout, Terra Water Kyogre, or even Earthquake, Terra Ground Landorus sounds absolutely terrifying if the power is too much. I have my fingers crossed, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried. The other thing I'm worried about is how much variability this could add to the game. Part of what makes Pokemon fun is figuring out what your best move is, regardless of what move the opponent selects. It is not possible to cover for every one of your opponent's Pokemon turning into any one of the 18 types at any point. For this one, we're just going to have to wait and see how the game turns out. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm super excited to play Scarlet and Violet next week and really excited to make a ton of great content around these games. Even though I already know they're not going to be the best games ever made, they could still be great Pokemon games. And that's all I'm hoping for. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.